Avantdale Bowling Club is a hip-hop project that is headed and fronted and ran, I guess, by the man Tom Scott, who is a New Zealand rapper. Now, I must say I don't know much about Tom Scott, or do I know anything really about Avantdale Bowling Club, as this is an album that found its way into popularity through, online circles, music circles, radio music, just to kind of passing it on through friends, that sort of really old school type attitude in the way that hip hop albums just kind of work their way up, and suddenly more and more people find out about them, and then more and more people are raving. It's kind of really nice to see an album like this suddenly make its way up the ranks in a pretty slow way, but it's being adored by quite a lot of people. And it came out quite a while ago. It's another one of those albums that I've gotten to just way past the date of release. I keep doing this, but at least I'm talking about the albums I genuinely feel passionate about at some point, because this is quite a special release, I think. So initially I heard this album actually back in like August, I think. Gave it a few listens, didn't really impact me, but I must say, with it being an album that's kind of slowly garnered attention, I decided to actually return to this and keep listening to see what I'd missed. A few critics that I genuinely really like have praised this as well. Rate Your Music, it's now made its way into the top 20 of 2018. I just felt like it was an album that, am I missing something here? Do I need to keep listening to this? Because I might not have given it the proper attention that it deserved on first initial listen, and it turns out that I did miss quite a lot with this album, because like I said, this is pretty special. So one thing that you will instantly notice about this album when you turn it on is the instrumentation. Throughout the whole of this album, the instrumentation is pretty damn lavish. It is expansive, it's quite extravagant at times. It makes you feel like you're watching a live orchestra play some amazing jazz music. Throughout this entire album, man, the instrumentation just floors me, especially on the first three cuts. I will say that is where the instrumentation is at its best, and then the final closing track as well. These tracks have the most gorgeous instrumentals implemented into them. Seriously, I don't even know if you can label them as just being hip-hop instrumentals that you might usually say when it comes to a hip-hop album, because these are just pieces of music, if anything. This is just straight up in the moment live music being played, and Tom is pretty much just rapping and singing over the music, to be honest. Now initially, I'll admit, I did think that the music was overshadowing Tom as a rapper, but as soon as I honed in and listened to the things he was saying, it didn't really take long for me to realize that he is an incredibly talented wordsmith, this guy. Seriously, he is talking some real shit on this album. One word to describe this album in its entirety would be responsibility. Responsibility is the key factor to everything that goes on in this album. This is an album that's coming to terms with the fact that you're a kid in a place where you might not have many opportunities, and you have to quickly grow up and realize the reality of your life, and that you are responsible for so much now in a way that you weren't before when you were just a teenager messing around. And as someone that's recently moved out and kind of fending for himself now in a way that's not really having that fallback on parents or whoever it is in your life that's looking after you, I can tell you, man, this is something that hits you hard without really giving you time to realize that, oh shit, I have to buy everything for myself now. I'm not really in any situation where I can just go to mum and daddy or whatever. Tom essentially is just kind of giving off advice throughout this entire album. He's talking about his own life, his own issues, how, on tracks like Friends, there are people that aren't really there for you in the way that they say they are. They're not using their actions to prove that they are your friends, they care about you, they are willing to help you in time of need. because there are people out there that don't do that. In that sense, that Tom is just realizing that shit, you know, I can't rely on these people that will let you down, that pretend that they care about you and then they quickly turn their back on you. I've got to be responsible for myself. And I think the way he words everything on this track particularly, pretty much the whole of the album, but like just the way he kind of reels off these issues is so real. Like you can tell this guy really knows his shit. Like you could definitely just imagine this man perhaps having a bit of a negative outlook, but also understanding the way things actually work. I think the way he starts this album off as well is so clever. Like the way he's just reeling off all of these years in his life that, you know, were significant for whatever reason. You know, he makes references to artists in the hip-hop genre and also things that he was doing in each year as well, and then as it kind of goes on it sort of gets a bit more serious and less about having fun. In a lot of ways it kind of comes across as like an old guy. I don't know how old Tom is, but it's sort of like an old guy just telling his life story and how like in '06 things got rough and in 2014 I did this, and you know, like it is a bit of a, like a, I could imagine it being a bit of a slog for some people to get through, but the way he's like rhyming on this and the way the music just like blends in with him, it just sounds fantastic. Like I can't really get enough of this track. And then right at the end of the track he's telling us that he's now brought a child into the world in that same neighborhood that he was telling us about right at the start of the track. And it's sort of that little realization that perhaps he's gone through all these years talking about what's happened, but he might not have really achieved the things he wanted to achieve in all that time, and he's now, you know, a man with a child and has to bring that child into this same world, and you know, he's not perhaps fully ready or really like knowing how to raise a child in this world. This track then goes into Pocket Lint, and man, this is absolutely the best lyrical song on this album. Like holy shit, some of the lines he comes out with here in, you know, talking about how he is completely broke with no money and there's just no hope, in the sense that the opportunities in his area are just completely gone and dead and people are turning to drugs and that kind of thing. He mentions at one point how the government are just like taking 20% of his money, and once that money is taken away, all he's got left is to spend the money he needs to survive, and then once all that money's gone, that's it. Like he just has no extra money in his life to help him get by in any way at all. It is just so real, this song. It is so real, the way he is detailing his neighborhood, his life, how fucked everything is. All he's got is pocket lint. And what's more terrifying about this track is that recently, it's kind of apt how I'm recording this review, and recently he made a tweet saying that making this album put him into like £14,000 worth of debt, not pounds, obviously, New Zealand dollars, and like how he spent years on this album to only find it's ended up making him way worse off than he originally was. How oh man, that's so bad. That is just such a harsh reality to find out. It just adds a different context to this album as a whole to me, because the entire album he's talking about how he's just got nothing. He's got nothing to fend for himself in this world, and the only one thing he had was making this album, and that one thing has made him worse off than he ever was before, and that is just unbelievably horrifying. Like when you just think about that, it is so sad. It makes you feel the words a little bit harder on this album, I think, because it just comes from a genuine place, you know. This ain't struggle rap, you know, oh it's hard out here, it's such a hard life. No, like it's just the reality. This is reality rap. Water Medley is a track that perhaps I haven't particularly got grips with yet, but that's kind of the beauty of this album, because you're gonna miss so much. He says so much on this album that you're not just gonna catch everything within like the first few listens, you know. You really have to dig deep in the lyrics. It's not just a one listen and dip. No, you're gonna have to sit with these lyrics. I mean, he's talking a lot about hydration on this track, which I think I think I approve of. An expansive 9-minute cut that utilizes its entirety. Honestly, that's the one thing about this album that, you know, there are only like 8 or 9 tracks, I believe, and each track is 6 minutes plus, but there's never a point where, oh, this track is dragging or anything like that. There's never any point like that on this album at all. I also like the way he references climate change on this track. I know it's a big debate that constantly crops up, but you know how he's like saying that, you know, water is like the essential essence of life, and perhaps for him, you know, he's grateful that he's got this one thing that's so important in life despite not having much else. Towards the end of the track, it just gets way more and more and more brutal as he's talking about like there's just no meaning or purpose to the songs he writes. He's thinking about giving up. There is just nothing in the way of any positivity that's coming in his life. It's important to mention as well, like the entirety of these tracks, like they're so long, but within verses, you know, Tom just does such a good job of like switching up his flow, switching up his inflection, throwing in some singing, throwing in speedier rap flows, or slowing it down to the point where it's almost spoken word. The versatility of this man is pretty phenomenal. It's just constantly evolving within the album, and the music is constantly just, you know, bloody fantastic, to be honest. Like that's what the music is. I did mention Responsibility earlier before, but I feel like Old Dogs is a bit of a kind of kickback, you know, relaxed type song that just completely forgets everything that's essential in his life, and it's just all about, you know, cracking open those beers or whatever, or, you know, perhaps even taking some drugs and just ignoring everything that's essential to his life. Perhaps it's something he needs for a day, but at the same time, it's the harsh reality of that, you know, if you're not putting in the effort, then perhaps doing this for a little bit too long can end up seeing the consequences that you're spending money on things that aren't too essential, or you're not working the hours to get the money that you need. I just think it's a good track that depicts the way of just taking everything out of your mind, even to the point where he says a line that's like, turn off the Wi-Fi and just, you know, focus on nature. I just looked out the window, I don't really know why, but that's what I mean. You just focus on things around you, you know, just kind of soak it all in, forget the things that are essential. But as we do, you know, find out on this album, that's not really something that's as easy to do. Like, it's easy to say, but it's not always easy to do when you do have those major responsibilities. And the track just kind of battles those inner thoughts with the sort of ideal lifestyle of, I just want to do nothing and relax. Moving straight into Home, it's a much more moody type track. I must say the instrumental here is just a bit too somber in comparison to the rest of the album. It totally works for the theme though, where he's talking about, you know, just standing at home and seeing like nothing in your house. You know, there's just nothing there that speaks to the amount of hard work you may have put in. Like, I've got nothing to show for it, that kind of thing. In terms of the music, I just think it's slightly less invigorating than the rest of the album, because, you know, the music on this album is pretty damn fantastic, and that's kind of the one thing that hooks me in the whole time. Quincy's March is a track that perhaps could be one of the more self-aware tracks here, in the sense that he's focusing on the fact that his best achievement is his son, and being the best rapper isn't the essential part of his life anymore. It's about being the best dad. He admits to being selfish at times. Perhaps that's in reference to making this album. Perhaps he feels selfish in focusing so hard on this album, to now later on finding out that it ended up making him lose a lot of money, you know, and he felt like even giving up on making this album. He references that on this very song too. And perhaps he's sort of coming to terms with the fact that he may be the reason why his life hasn't gone to the way it has. Sure, there have been other influences, but the sort of way he just kind of admits to being selfish just makes you wonder, is he blaming himself here? Or is he, you know, taking responsibility a little bit more here? And honestly, this is just something that occurs across the entire album. Like, it's constant conflicts with Tom. He's constantly just questioning the way he's done things, the way he's handled everything, how his life has panned out, and there's just so much to these emotions. There's so much that's involved into what's ended up becoming his life. It's not just one thing you can pin it down to. I've talked for so long, I should probably wrap this up right now. This is going to be a frigging long review. But just one little final thing I want to say is that the term jazz rap is something that gets thrown around quite easily on a lot of albums. I've probably used it before in my reviews, but I think I have mentioned as well in my Tripole Quest video that jazz rap is almost always labelled quite incorrectly. Like The Low End Theory or Blowout Comb, Late Registration, To Pimp a Butterfly. Sure, all these albums have jazz elements, but they're not really jazz rap, are they? Like, it's more chopped up jazz samples being laced into the beats, and perhaps they have quite a warm, jazzy feel to them, but generally it's more about the beats, you know? It's not really jazz music and there's a rapper rapping over the jazz music. But with this album right here, I think Avantdale Bowling Club is one of the most unique albums where it is just straight up jazz music and this man Tom Scott is just rapping over the music. Like, I don't think there's anything else out there like this. This is quite a special album. I think that there may be people out there that might not be so into this album, which is totally fine, but I think you've got to be able to recognize that there isn't really that much music out there that you can throw into the same category as this. I genuinely think this is one of the more unique hip-hop albums we've had in this entire decade. And it probably sounds like I'm gonna throw like a meaty rating on this, and not to let people down, but I do genuinely think this is a great album. But the issue is like I said, just those few cuts in the middle of the album just don't have the music that the first few cuts have, and you know, it just kind of drags the album a little bit down for me. But I can genuinely see this album being an album that over time I grow to love even more. But right for now, I think it's a great release, and I think it's certainly worth your time and one of the better releases we've had in music and hip-hop this year. So I'm going to go with an 8.5, but I feel as though it could easily rise up to a 9 or even potentially higher. But just to be safe right now, I'm going to go with that because I do feel as though just a few cuts, just end up paling in comparison to the best tracks on this album. But with that said, this is fantastic. Please give it a listen if you haven't already. Let me know your thoughts actually about this album if you have heard it, because it has been out a while. And subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Do have a good day. This one right here, this one right here, this one right here.